You are indeed watching Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. Welcome back to everyone, or welcome to you for the first time here on our weekly Thursday live stream show, the Freedom Side, every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Breakthrough News. And as we always do, I'm Eugene Perry, by the way, your host, and as we always do at the start, we always want to remind people to take a second to share this stream wherever you're watching, so those who are following you can be following us. We've got a great show, as we always do. We're going to be getting into quite a bit around, well, really one issue, but there are many things that, of course, ripple out from this, and we're really focusing in on the issue of mass incarceration here today and some of the broader implications of that. We're going to be talking about the jail population in the state of Texas. Obviously, we've all been, many of us at least to say, been following very closely the unbelievable crisis, catastrophe, really caused by capitalism that has left so many millions without basics in Texas. We've also seen the mutual aid that's been going on. But what's happening in jails? What's happening in prisons? We're going to be talking about that. We're going to also be speaking with several individuals who are directly affected, both themselves and their family members, by some of the worst issues that are frequently brought up as it concerns the criminal legal system, whether it's pretrial detention, whether it's the railroading of innocent people, whether it's these, multi-decade, lifelong style sentences that destroy individuals, destroy families, and destroy communities. And then we're also going to be speaking with two organizers who spend a lot of time working with those on the inside, and many of those who have been charged, people in pretrial, all those different pieces around organizing for the human rights of incarcerated people, as well as organizing for real change in this system to end mass incarceration and end these unbelievable abuses and the unbelievable brutality. So as you can see, of course, many, many important things that we need to get to here tonight. So just take this second, hit that share button, make sure that everybody who is following you can follow us as we move on with our show here this evening on the Freedom Side. Now, as we always do, or well, as we've done for the past couple of weeks, we want to just check in before we start with my man Juan in the booth. Juan, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm wearing my favorite sweatshirt, my NUMSA sweatshirt.
Okay.
Shout out to all the workers in South Africa. Shout out to that, they're doing that strike recently.
Yes.
I know we have like a really heavy show today. I wanted to talk about some stuff that's been going on. I don't know if you heard about it, Eugene, but Coca-Cola has pissed off a lot of right-wingers because they had a training that was part of LinkedIn. It was like a LinkedIn package, and people can do trainings on it. And It was a training on how you can be less white. So this is this is actually like a picture here from the training. And folks are just pissed, But I think it's it had good intentions.
Yeah.
And this is not a new training. This is a training that a lot of people that even you, Eugene, know of, have gone through. So I just want to show the alums of this training.
Please.
So one well-known alum is Al Pacino. How do you think he got those Latino character roles? He played Scarface and Carlito in Carlito's Way. He
did a lot. He also was an Italian in
He's
The Godfather.
not Latino. He is Italian. Adele got a lot of slack last year but it's all about being less white at the end of the day.
Yeah, as long as you're being less oppressive, right?
You said what?
As long as you're being less oppressive. That was number one. I don't even know what that means.
I mean, my eyes feel a little oppressed from watching this, but that's neither here nor there. And our boy Justin Timberlake.
Stop. You really.
We can't forget about our girl Katy Perry, though.
Oh. Even the look.
And I feel like the most successful out of the Be Less White campaign is Chet Hanks, Tom Hanks' son. I had a little clip.
Please.
Yo, big up the youth them way out of Kingston. Me wake up this morning and me see the thing turn up. Internet gone mad. Respect, you don't know. Me soon forward a yard. Booyaka, booyaka.
Not Booyaka.
Booyaka, booyaka. I like, where is he when he was shouting out Kingston? I mean, all that can make me think of is, he put out a tweet or an Instagram post, I think it was, on the day of January 6th and was like, I'm so ashamed to be an American. And I was like, since when you were an American, my dude? I thought you were repping Kingston. Wow, unbelievable. Well, shout out to Coca-Cola for helping all these individuals. That's really is. Let me just actually clarify. So you're saying that if you go to the Coca-Cola LinkedIn, that's how you take the train?
So basically, there's those diversity trainings, and they use LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has one diversity training that's actually I think associated with Robin
DiAngelo.
DiAngelo, the author of
Fragility.
White Fragility.
Yeah.
So an employee of Coca-Cola saw it, and she's calling herself a whistleblower. But it's been making the rounds in right wing spheres. I thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. This is one of the many reasons that you're so crucial to us. You're following them big stories, but no, I appreciate that. That Justin Timberlake, that was a throwback right there. But we wanted to start a little bit on a light note because our show is heavy here tonight. Serious issues, important issues that will have been ongoing for some time and will continue to be ongoing, and we'll be talking about that organizing. But sometimes it's better in these times, I think, to at least have a little bit of fun as you move forward and as we continue to learn. So don't forget to share this show on your stream as we move into it. Now, the first issue, as I mentioned, that we want to talk about here is the conditions inside of jails in the state of Texas. Now, of course, many of us have seen, all of us hopefully have seen the just terrible devastation that's been wrought in Texas by this horrible, deregulated energy industry there. But one question that I think probably many people are wondering, and certainly some of you may have even have heard of, is what was going on with people who are locked up in jails and prisons. Obviously, there are many challenges and many problems with those prisons already, so what could be happening now? So we're going to go to some fantastic guests to speak to this, but before we get to specifically to our guests, what we did want to do is play a few clips from both individuals inside and affected family members as it concerns what was happening there during this cold snap and this crisis inside of jails in Texas.
I've been here a little over a month. I'm just here for misdemeanor DWI. They just restrict everybody to court.
I'm a little bit tired, and our kiosk still doesn't work, so I won't be able to refill my seizure medication, and I really need my seizure medication.
So no water, spraying other people's urine in the toilet, defecation, stuff like that. There's a lot of people in here, and they ain't trying to do no releasing, they ain't trying to get nobody no bonds, they ain't trying to do nothing. The water is still disgusting. We still got to boil our water. They're not bringing up no fresh water to drink. But they didn't give us none for this morning. They gave us 2 bottles of water earlier yesterday with a biscuit, the blueberry biscuit, and a peanut butter, no bread. That's it. That's all we get for breakfast. They're not worried about us. They're not worried about nothing going on with us.
I was just calling in reference to my fiance. He's currently incarcerated, and he was crying to me, and I told him, look, just call your parole officer, and we're going to find out what you need to do. They locked him up, so I called up there. I said, well, can he at least get a mat? It's been over 72 hours. He's been sleeping on the floor. He's not used to jail conditions. He's 24 years old, and I'm just saying, is there any way he can get a mat? And he stated, I don't have any mats, and, I'm not going to move him until a bunk becomes available. There's nothing you can do about it, and so that's just what's going to happen. They're giving him like a 3 to 4 minute courtesy call in the morning. There's money on his phone, but he can't use it. He can't purchase food. They're giving him a shower, but it's like once, and it's very cold water. It's just inhumane conditions. He's just being treated like an animal. None of them have at least a blanket. And, we have this freeze over Texas right now. It's cold everywhere. So their water's frozen in the county jail, and they don't have any water in there, and it's cold in there. And he's sleeping on the floor.
And again, that's from the Texas Jail Project there. You saw the texasjailproject.org in terms of that. Obviously a very serious situation. And as we continue the show, we want to bring in here Krishnaveni Gundu, who's the co-founder and executive director of the Texas Jails Project, and Goldie Van Zant, whose husband Jerome is currently stuck in Harris County Jail down in Texas. That's the Houston area for those who don't know. But Krish and Goldie, thank you so much for being willing to join us here on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Well, the pleasure is certainly all ours. And, Krish, I'll start with you here with my first question, which is really just, how hard did this power crisis that we've seen around the country, how hard did it hit people in jails in Texas? You might be muted.
I'm sorry, that has to happen at least once a day.
Yes.
This is like my 10th Zoom or whatever today. I'm so sorry. Even before the power crisis, we've been watching what's happening in the jails due to COVID-19. We have been taking phone calls and directly from jails since March of last year, and we're almost 1 year into COVID-19. And we were listening to folks telling us about all these awful conditions, and we kept thinking it can't get any worse. And sure enough, when the storm hit, it got worse. It got much worse. Everything that was a problem before the storm hit became just got exacerbated. You heard all the men who were calling the water. They lost the water. It was freezing. It's always actually cold and freezing in the jails, but it was much worse. It just felt like a meat locker. And they didn't get bottled water the first few days. In fact, a lot of jails brought in no bottled water. We actually bought bottled waters for a small rural county jail where everything was shut down. They had no means of getting water, and we brought in some cases to give out to the jail. So the toilets were overflown. People couldn't wash hands. This whole time during COVID, they were being told to wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. That's pretty much the only way to keep yourself safe from COVID. And then all of a sudden, you can't wash your hands. And you get 2 bottles of water a day, and the choice is between washing your hands or keeping yourself hydrated. And this one of these men that I had been talking to this whole year, he said, and I always ask them, do you have access to free soap? Do you have enough cleaning supplies? Do you have hygiene supplies? And they were saying, Miss Krish, you always ask us about soap. Well, guess what? We have plenty of soap now because we don't have any water to use it. So things are pretty bad.
And, Goldie, one of the things I'm curious about, so your husband Jerome is already in Harris County Jail, which I'm sure is bad enough, but then this crisis hits. I really just wonder, how did it feel on your end? What were you feeling? The power's out, the water's going down, and here is your husband Jerome trapped in this situation.
Very upset. One of the things that I was upset about is that they were walking around with blankets inside the jail cell, and it's freezing. And one of the guards told them that they couldn't have blankets on inside the jail cell. And I'm like, y'all got short sleeves. What you mean you can't have blankets on inside the jail cell? It's freezing there. So that was one of my main concerns. And then one of the nights, they didn't even get dinner. I mean, they were just told, there's no dinner for you tonight. Go to bed, in the cold, in the freezing. And that's Harris County Jail for you.
I think that's such an important point. And one other question I have for you, Goldie, along that similar line is, I feel anytime there's, a major crisis like this, a flood, an earthquake, people are, this sounds so terrible in jails and prisons. But, sort of in normal times, there's so much of a stigma put on those who have been caught up in the criminal legal system. It, doesn't matter whether you're guilty or not, quite frankly. A lot of times these stigmas are put on you. In your opinion, Goldie, what do you hope people, maybe see from this about the individuals who are in places like Harris County Jail, as opposed to what we're taught we should think about those kind of individuals?
Okay, so most of them are in there because of mental health problems. My husband suffers. He's a veteran. He suffers from PTSD. And, he's just had and he's bipolar. He has a lot of mental health issues. So he's not a criminal, as per se. So that's what I think a lot of people misunderstand about the criminal justice system, and especially here in Harris County, we have a lot of mental health issues, especially with our Black men, and a lot of times they're just incarcerated, just because of their mental health, and they haven't been able to seek that mental health assistance that they need.
A crucially important issue about who's there. I think, Chris, you wanted to get on that same point. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to point out this is a county jail we're talking about. We have 239 county jails and spread across 254 counties in Texas. And it's important to remember that over 80% now, when we started this work back in 2006, it used to be over 70%, but now it's over 80% of the population is pre-trial. That means they've not been convicted, just been charged, sitting in jail, can't afford to pay your bond, and that's why you can't get out. And Harris County in particular, today's population is 9,067, and out of that, 7,935 people are pre-trial. That's 87.5% of the folks that have not gone to court, not been convicted, nothing, just sitting and waiting. And out of that, about 5,731 people are waiting there because they can't afford to pay their bond. This is a problem with cash bail. If they're basically criminalizing poverty and nothing else. If there was other ways to make people come back to court, we should be using that, but we haven't. And I want to give you an example. I mean, people think this is a crisis, that just sort of act of God. I disagree with that, because we had plenty of time to change our policies. We had plenty of time to act. We decided not to act. In fact, we decided we were going to be even more restrictive about who we were going to release during this pandemic, thanks to the executive order put in by the governor. So as a result, people who should be out with their families, being safe, not being stuck in an overcrowded jail during a pandemic, they got caught up in the storm. And they would have been safer if they were home. So I think that's something that people forget, that just because they're in jail, they deserve to be treated like that. No, that the one thing we keep hearing from everybody. In fact, I received a call from a jailer yesterday from a small county whistleblower. And she said, I understand they're in jail, but they shouldn't be treated like an animal. And she was calling in to report her administrative folks, and her problem was that they were being treated worse than an animal. And this is something we hear over and over and over again.
Give me just one quick second here. Sorry about that. I think that's such a critically important point about sort of what we think and the way that we have dehumanized so many people who are in jails, who are in prisons, and the thought being that you don't deserve human rights. And I think that's such an important point you make, Christian. And Goldie, I want your thoughts on the similar piece, right? Because I think this is so important. And my experience is having my own family members incarcerated and other people I know. I mean, this is something we always have to fight for, right? To fight to say our loved ones really are human beings. Talk about that if you could, Goldie, the fight and the desire to really let people know who your husband Jerome is, and that it's not, it's not what people say that it should be.
Yes, I agree. The thing is that, when they're incarcerated, people automatically think they're guilty, and they haven't even been tried yet. I mean, they automatically think that they're guilty, and then they're treated like they are guilty when they go to jail, which is a mistake. They are tried and guilty before they even go to court or before they see a judge or anything like that. So I think that has a lot to do with it, that they're treated, if you're arrested, you're automatically considered guilty, point blank, or else why would you be here? And I think, and it especially has an impact on Black and brown people, or, anything like that go to jail. I think that is not, the way that it should be at all. Because they're human beings. They should be treated like humans. Like during the storm, they didn't even have water to flush the toilets or anything like that. So, they was having to go to the bathroom, and, it was just my husband called me and he said it was just awful. It was just awful. So you're not being treated like a human, and then you're given served, bologna sandwiches, sack lunches and things like that. And the food is just terrible. They're not being treated like human beings. And I think that's not good at all. That's not.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And, one of the things that I guess this all raises, Krish, is what you all are doing at the Texas Jails Project. And obviously, you're not just standing pat while this is happening. Talk a little bit about the organizing you've been doing around this issue, but I'm sure well before this and after it's over, you'll still be pushing forward. Oh, Krish, you're muted again. I'm sorry.
So mute again.
I'm sorry. There's so much background noise. You didn't. I don't want you to hear the dog and the kids yelling. Yeah. So we've been around for about 15 years. Texas Jail Project is a really small grassroots advocacy group. We were founded by 4 women because one of our friends was in jail, an activist and a peace activist and an environmental activist. She went to jail for a protest, and that's how it started. We learned about county jails and the conditions in county jails, and we started collecting those stories. And our mission is to basically collect the stories and testimonies and amplify them so we can change the mindset and we can change policies. And we focus on vulnerable populations such as people with mental illnesses, people with disabilities, veterans, pregnant women, the folks that are most vulnerable, because we find that our county jails have become kind of like the emergency rooms of our society. People that should be ending up in the hospital are ending up in the jail. So over 80% of the calls we get for help are from families whose loved ones have some sort of mental illness or disability, and they have an interaction with law enforcement that puts them in jail. So we have been collecting stories of pretrial detention, collecting stories of people with mental illness stuck in jails for a long period of time. Texas has its own problem of, you probably heard this, the jails in Texas are the largest confiners of people with mental illnesses because of sustained defunding of the state hospital system, the mental health and hospital system. So we have people sitting in jail waiting for about 1.5 years to go to the state hospitals they were found incompetent to stand trial. So that's a huge issue. And so we've just been collecting all these stories and testimonies. And so when COVID started, we decided to take calls directly from jails. And that was a bit of a shift from just listening to families. We wanted to listen to people directly from jails. And that has really helped us document in real time how the state has failed in curbing the spread of COVID-19 in jails. People have been sending us their medical grievances, their records, their like clear documentation of how they are doing their own contact tracing inside the jail because the jails are not doing anything. The lack of testing, so they don't have to test. There's no mandatory testing. Now you have to report positive COVID cases to the public health department, but you don't have to actually test them. That's not mandated. So there was a different narrative we were hearing from the state, but at the same time, we were hearing all these different stories from across the state, and they were all very similar. We're not being tested. We're all being put in together. We're supposed to be on quarantine, but then they bring in new people from the street, straight off the street, no quarantine. So what's the point of quarantine? And then the result of the quarantine is the backlog in the court system. So court dates getting reset over and over again. I talked to somebody yesterday. He had his court date reset 22 times.
Wow.
22 times. He's been there almost 30 months. And that's not unusual. And in a 6-month period ending in October, there were only 72 Zoom hearings, bail hearings held by the judges in Harris County, felony judges. And I say that to sort of go back to my previous point of, this was not an act of God. We could have done something to depopulate our jails and prevent this public health crisis from getting worse, but we didn't. So it's a combination of inaction and lack of good policy.
I think that's a very important point, and I think that's the context that really is critically important. Goldie, I'll give you the last word here. I just wonder, what is your message to other people who are out there who have family members who are in jail, who are facing similar situations, about whether or not they should try to do something?
I would definitely write anyone that you can. Write your congressman. I mean, write your senator, whoever that may be. Just write people in reference to your loved one being locked up in jail. I mean, that's what we need to do. We need to start the ball rolling about these people being locked up in jail and awaiting, just awaiting a hearing. I mean, like Chris was just saying. I mean, their sentence, their jail, it gets reset and reset and reset. They go in front of the court and then it gets reset again, so they can be in there, for a long time. Right. Especially if you don't have the money for the cash bond to get them out. So yes, that's a very, very big problem, and it's something that we really need to start advocating for.
Well, I really appreciate the advocacy that y'all have done so far, and I really appreciate you being willing to join us here on the show. Goldie, Krish, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
No, the pleasure was all ours, and hopefully you have a good rest of your evening. Now, for those who maybe have just tuned in, we were talking, as you may have heard there, about the situation in jails, in particular Harris County Jail. We heard that in the Houston area. So certainly, if you didn't see it, go back and watch it. But if you just tuned in, also make sure that you share the show, hit that share button. We want whoever is following you to be able to follow us with the rest of the show, and we still have quite a bit to go here. Some very important stories that we want to bring to you here on the Freedom Side. So we want to continue moving states, if you will. We were just talking about Texas. Talk a little bit more about things that are going on in New York. There are obviously a lot of parallels that I think we will all see here. Excuse me. And we want to bring on in this next piece here, very happy, very honored to bring on Prakash Shurmuron. Excuse me if I got that incorrect. Prakash was 15 years old when he was arrested. 15 years old, coerced into a false confession, held pretrial for 4 years in Rikers Island. He's now out, still continuing to struggle. Very happy to have Prakash here. And we also are very excited, very honored to have Shaniqua Pippin with us as well. Is an NYC teacher, a teacher here in New York City, an organizer fighting for the release of her brother, Ronald Williams, who, get this, is serving a 100-year sentence for a crime he didn't commit. So obviously you can see just from that alone the deep injustices that are happening in New York as well as Texas. So thank you so much for both joining us. Very happy to have you here. Prakash, Shaniqua, thanks so much. Well, the pleasure is certainly all ours. There's a lot we could say here. There's a lot of places I could start. Both of these are critically important cases. Prakash, I'm going to start with you. Your case really just hits on so many elements of what's wrong with the criminal justice system in the United States in general, from pretrial to confessions to the situation inside of prisons itself. But let me just ask you to start here, maybe for those who haven't heard about your case. Just give us a summary, if you will, Prakash, of what you faced so far and what you continue to face in front of the legal system.
Well, it's been over 6 years now, and I'm still here awaiting a fair trial. So that right there should tell it all on how poor and unjust and unequal this criminal punishment system is, especially here in New York City, in New York State, period.
You know, I think that that's critically important on so many levels. And one of the things I'm just curious about here and just how this all played out is, how did you even find yourself in a situation where, this was taking place? Like, what is the sort of the piece that led to you initially being arrested, and what are some of the things that happened to you when you were being held and they were pressing you on these issues?
Well, I was arrested 4 days after this alleged crime. NYPD officers illegally entered my apartment and basically placed me in handcuffs, and that was it for my freedom. I was 15 years old, and I was taken to the precinct where they just aggressively and just illegally interrogated me for hours. until I just basically broke down and just said whatever they wanted to hear.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's a terrible situation, and then you end up in first of all pretrial, then you're locked up, now you're out, but it's not over yet, right? I mean, I think that's the important thing for people to realize. Even though you've been able to get out on parole, you are still facing significant charges on this so-called crime that you were coerced into speaking on.
Correction. I'm not on parole. I got arrested in December of 2014. I awaited pretrial detention for nearly 4 years before I was even afforded my first trial. Unfortunately, I was convicted. My judge denied me from presenting evidence, that would have proved my innocence. I was sent up to a maximum security New York State prison, where I remained there for a year and a half. I received a decision on my appeal. June 24th of 2020, my conviction was overturned and a new trial was ordered due to the fact that, my judge improvidently exercised his discretion in denying me to present expert testimony on the subject of juvenile false confessions.
Shaniqua, I'm curious to hear something similar, really. If you could just give us really maybe an initial summary of what happened with Ronald, what happened with your brother, and how he ended up with a 100-year sentence for a crime he didn't commit.
Yes, thank you for having me. My brother Ronald was arrested in 2015. Similarly to Prakash, they showed up to my mom's house around like 7:30 in the morning. She was getting ready for work. Full SWAT gear with a warrant that had a picture of my brother, but someone else's name. And so upon asking for them to show the warrant, before my mom opened the door, they were refusing. And they said that they kept telling her, oh, we need to come in, and we'll show you the warrant. My mom, not really knowing her rights, agreed to let one in. But of course, they all came in and took Ronald out. They woke him up from his sleep, grabbed him out of his bed, and arrested him. He was being held at Rikers for 2 years before he received the trial. In the 2 years leading up to his trial, we worked closely with organizers and family members to fundraise to get him a private lawyer. And the private lawyer, Andrew, was very tenacious. He did not want Ronald to go to prison, and he believed wholeheartedly in his innocence. And so he fought really hard, and he was winning all of the pretrial hearings. 2 weeks before trial was set to start, the Brooklyn DA, made claims that Andrew had told us, like myself, my mom, our other siblings, to delete evidence, but there was no evidence to delete. And so they made this claim, and the judge told Andrew that he either needed to step down or face criminal charges himself. Myself and my family had to go to court because we are now, they're now trying to incriminate us and saying that we were tampering with evidence. So we had to go be interviewed under oath and get affidavits signed and whatnot. And everything showed that what the DA said wasn't true. However, they really wanted this conviction. And so the judge still got rid of our lawyer, and my brother was then assigned an 18B court-assigned lawyer who it was very clear that he had no interest in trying to help my brother. So much so, at the end of the trial, after Ronald was convicted, he sat there and looked me and my mom and my 80-something-year-old grandmother in the face and was like, oh yeah, he's paging through the files, oh, he shouldn't even have gotten convicted, at the end of everything. So it was a long journey between his arrest and him actually receiving a trial, and it was not a fair trial. There were a lot of things that shouldn't have happened. For example, he was supposed to be tried on his own because none of the evidence from the actual case pointed towards him. They were pointing towards everyone else. And so he should have been tried alone, and he wasn't even granted that right. So that's just a little capsule of what happened leading up to his incarceration.
No, I appreciate that summary. One of the things you said really stuck out to me is, that they really wanted this conviction. And I just wonder from your point of view, what this really shows about the system, Shaniqua. I mean, it seems like it's more important to them just to put a number on the board than, who's guilty or innocent.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if people have looked at the statistics around like the prison industrial complex, but most people who are incarcerated for committing crimes of survival. And when they get into prison, we are told that, they're going to be rehabilitated, or they're going to be helped. This is going to help them re-enter into society. But the truth is, the prison industrial complex exists for profit, not for the rehabilitation of people. And it exists to as a holding place for what would be considered the surplus population in our country, which is like people who don't have jobs or are just working class or might be in between jobs, and they're just trying to find, ways to put food on their table or clothes on their backs. And so they end up, in the system where they're criminalized for trying to survive. And the mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex serves as just like a holding, like a cell for these people. And instead of our government taking the wealth that we have and using it to create social programs that people need in order to survive, they are funneling about $81 billion a year into prisons and into expanding prisons and into making them quote unquote more livable, when really it's like, no, if you expand prisons, the only thing you're going to do is fill them because it's filling up your pockets. So yeah.
No, I absolutely appreciate that. And, Prakash, I'm curious your thoughts on the same question. I mean, it really does seem like maybe that's two things that are very similar about what happened to Ronald and what happened to you, is it really does seem that all that really mattered to them was to have somebody, regardless of what was really going on.
And there's countless of cases out there that's exactly the same. They had no evidence, no probable cause to even, apprehend a particular individual, but they just do it. They do it just to close that file, get the conviction, and go on about their business. This whole system is a business. It's a corporation that's just designed to cage us, and for them, like she said, to help their pockets. It's the truth.
Prakash, I'm hoping you could talk also a little bit about, what y'all are doing now. Obviously, you're still continuing to fight to press your own innocence, and also I think to uplift some of these bigger issues. Talk about some of the organizing you're doing and some of what you're hoping to uplift.
Well, I was released on January 19th. I went to court about 2 weeks ago, and they just adjourned until May 3rd. But a rally was, a rally took place my last court date in front of the courthouse, and there's another rally that's going to take place on May 3rd at 1 p.m. in front of Queens Criminal Courthouse to basically demand that Melinda Katz, Queens District Attorney's Office, drop all charges permanently. And I'm not gonna stop fighting. I'm never gonna stop fighting. Never. I was literally just kidnapped by the system. I was kidnapped by the system at the age of 15. I grew up in an environment no teenager should ever have to go through. At the age of 19, I was convicted and sentenced to 9 years to life in prison. And now I'm here on home confinement with an ankle monitor fighting to prove my innocence 6 years later.
And are you hoping that people seeing your story can start to lift up this issue, especially what's happening to juveniles here in New York State?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, well, allegedly there's a lot of, juvenile, lifers, and they want to change the juvenile offender laws, but in 1978, the juvenile offender law was enacted, and basically they changed the ages of criminal responsibility in New York State. So, which basically made it so that anyone that's 12 years or older can go to prison for the rest of their life. Yeah.
I mean, you almost don't even know what to make of that. It's so it's just so absurd. One thing I also asked you, Prakash, that I think is important, and you brought this up already, that you were in an environment that no teenager should be forced to should be forced into, or put into, or anything, should just not end up in at all. If you could speak to us just a little bit about that, and what maybe you wish people who don't know about what it means when a juvenile is imprisoned.
Oh man. I got arrested when I was 15. I was sent to Crossroads Juvenile Detention Center, located in Brooklyn. I was held there for about a year and a half. I was transferred to Rikers Island in July of 2016. And from that point on, it's like I had no choice but to like mature and develop at a rapid pace, because I'm around grown men, and it's sad, but it's like I grew up in jail. The system watched me grow.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. It's hard to even imagine. I'm sure it's hard for you to even relive, and I appreciate you again, Prakash, for being on with us. Shaniqua, I know you're also continuing to push forward here. I had the privilege of being part of a letter writing campaign for Ronald a few months ago. Talk a little bit about the ongoing efforts that are happening to rectify this.
So, I mean, the letter writing is something we always come back to. Right now, the main focus for us as a family is trying to secure a criminal appeals attorney that will actually dedicate themselves to getting an appeal for Ronald, which when we've been talking to different lawyers, the going rate seems to be between $40,000 and $50,000 to retain the lawyer. So that has been our main focus. He has been assigned a court-appointed lawyer. However, we haven't heard much from her, and so we don't know what's going on. So our main goals right now are fundraising, but outside of that, it's always just trying to raise awareness about mass incarceration and about Ronald's case through letter writings, through forums, speaking at rallies, connecting with people like Prakash and other families who are going through the same things, just trying to kind of build this movement of people against this system, because we need an army. So most of our work has been focused mainly right now is a focus around fundraising. So we've been selling T-shirts and totes and things like that to try and hopefully get him a better lawyer.
One thing I also just want to ask you too, Shaniqua, I should ask you this earlier. I'm sorry to circle back around here, but I mean, mentioning family members as you did and the impact, and I think any of us who have ever had a family member in jail or prison, the impact is heavy. But talk, if you could, Shaniqua, maybe even more than normal in the context of COVID-19. It seems like it has to be even more tense and more stressful to have someone you love behind bars.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that is also what has pushed us to go back to focusing more on the fundraising aspect of everything. Ronald is actually asthmatic, and so he, growing up, every single winter, literally, he spent at least 2 weeks in the hospital because his asthma is so bad. And so when this pandemic hit, it really sent our anxieties and our worries through the roof because he's considered at higher risk of complications if he contracts it. And we all know that they are not taking the proper precautions in prisons to ensure that inmates are safe and that they are, remaining socially distanced and things like that. I mean, he couldn't even get a mask for the first half of the pandemic. Meanwhile, they had the inmates there working to create hand sanitizers and to create things for us on the outside that they themselves were not allowed to use. I don't know if you all remember the unveiling that happened earlier in the pandemic when we couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere, and the city officials unveiled all of these, they're like, oh, we've saved the city, without telling us that that was prison labor. They got those things because they had inmates making it for us and refused to give it to them. And so our stress levels have been through the roof throughout this entire pandemic. And it's been kind of hard to I guess, figure out how to get from point A to point B at times, because as a family member, you're emotionally involved. So I'm trying to be an organizer and a family member at the same time. And it's very difficult to kind of, separate the two and to create the distance that you need to be disciplined as an organizer. So, yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Well, I know you are the campaign. You guys are on Instagram at Justice for Ronald Williams, right?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And then Prakash, y'all are also on Instagram at Free Prakash Alliance?
Yes, correct.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, Instagram, if you're on Instagram, Free Prakash Alliance. Also on Instagram, go to Justice for Ronald Williams. Free Prakash Alliance, Justice for Ronald Williams. Don't forget, we'll try to put it on our social media as well, so check that. We're going to continue to keep following both these issues, both these cases, continue to push as much knowledge as we can about them all over the world to the extent we can. Prakash, Shaniqua, thank you so much. Really, we were honored to have you here on Breakthrough News.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. The pleasure was certainly all ours. And again, you can go to Instagram.com/Free Prakash Alliance if you want to get behind Prakash and help him push forward his efforts here. And you can also go to Instagram.com Justice for Ronald Williams. That's Instagram, Justice for Ronald Williams. Free Prakash Alliance, Justice for Ronald Williams. Hopefully everyone will take a look at both of those pages here. Today, I'd say if you're not on Instagram, that's a pretty good reason to get on to figure out how you can help out these two critically important cases. We're going to continue to move forward here, so if you're still watching, hit that share button. We've got more for you. And now we are turning to, again, we're staying on the same issue of mass incarceration, but we want to talk with two friends of the show, people we're very happy to have on here who do a lot of organizing with those on the inside and those on the outside as it concerns the issue of mass incarceration. Happy to have back with us Kim Smith, an organizer for the Party for Socialism and Liberation in Columbia, South Carolina, also the co-founder of the Soda City Bail Fund. It's also in Columbia, South Carolina, and an outside spokesperson for Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. And we are very happy to have here, I think for the first time, but definitely a friend of the show, Kirby Joseph, who's a longtime police brutality organizer, and community organizer in Brooklyn, New York. Kim and Kirby, thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Kim, I will start with you here. We've been talking all night about horrible conditions in prison, how much current events, whether it be COVID, whether it be what we saw in Texas, have been behind that. But, we talked about Texas, we talked about New York, and it really seems like a lot of the issues are very similar, Kim. So, I guess I want your take on whether or not we should really just be focusing on, the individual bad prison officials, or whether we need to talk about this being more systemic?
I think it's time we just talk about how it's more systemic. We can talk about the prison guards, but they're a part of a bigger problem, right? They're a part of this system. They're upholding this system that's harming these people that are incarcerated. So we have to talk about it on a systemic level, how this system of incarceration and what these people go through inside, the men, the women, and children, it's by design because they're not seen as human.
Kirby, one of the things that that I'm also curious about here is how you view the role of organizing for those who have been victimized by mass incarceration in the context of all the broader struggles against oppression and exploitation. I mean, where does this struggle fit in your view? Kirby, you might be muted. Oh.
Am I muted?
Got you now.
Oh, yeah, but organizing for folks who are within the prison industrial complex is critical work. It affects 2.4 million people within the United States, most of that being Black and brown people, poor people. We just had Prakash and Shaniqua talk about cases that they're involved in. Prakash is fighting for his life. Ronald is facing a 100-year charge. Young Black and brown men, boys, right, who are incarcerated. Every day we see police, no matter what city or state that you're in, sweep up our communities to make their quota and put our young people in different cells for all matters of time. Pretrial detention affects 500,000 people, right, within the prison industrial complex that is already made up of 2.4 million. That's 74% of people who are just sitting in cells for being legally innocent, right? And while people like to jump on stories of police brutality, families that I work with and other folks stood and organized with here on this program today, we have people who are alive in cells being swept up right now, and their family members and ourselves won't even know where they are.
Mm-hmm. Kim, you're an outside organizer, or spokesperson rather, for Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, which is a network that some of us know of people who are inside. But the important piece that I wanted to talk to you about, or ask you about here, Kim, is these networks in and of themselves. I mean, I feel that oftentimes it's not known as much that, certainly I think, a lot of what is happening around the human rights of those inside is really driven by those who are on the inside.
And that's the thing. I think people kind of have this way of taking away agency of people who are incarcerated. And they're some of our strongest, comrades and some of our strongest organizers in the struggle. Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, who I'm an outside liaison for, they came up with demands to meet and talk about their situation, and they've been pushing these demands, and they've been coordinating with us and be on the outside and saying, hey, this is what we need, this is how we do it. And they're organizing inside. They're not just focused on outside, they're focused on building and organizing with people who are incarcerated and finding that power with them. So I think a lot of people really need to stop trying to, make it a charity case and really see that these are the organizers. These are people that are organizing themselves and organizing within prisons. They're the leaders of this struggle.
Kirby, I'm curious your same thoughts just about maybe, I don't know if it's downgrading, downplaying, pushing to the side, really the role that those who are most affected in this are having in raising consciousness, politicizing people, and pushing this struggle forward.
When you think of George Jackson, right, who was sentenced to a year to life, right, for a $70 false charge, and while in the pit of hell, organize people to join political organizations outside of jail, right? When people talk about Angela Davis, who is one of the main faces of the abolitionist movement right now, but her story, her legacy comes from being in prison most of her young political career, becoming the face of the movement for mass incarceration during the 60s and 70s from prison. Right, Bobby Seale, the Panthers, the Brown Berets. When you think of Fred Hampton, who was litigating for his survival on the outside without an attorney because nobody would represent him. These are folks that are not only competent, but the most radical because they're fighting in a place where they literally have no freedom, where they're literally constitutionally labeled slaves. So they're organizing in the worst position that you can organize in, and they choose to do it every day. Have a clear path of what liberation looks like. They think about it, they dream about it. That means that they're most eager. That means that they're the most marginalized leaders that we're looking for to lead struggles, and they are.
Mm-hmm. You know, Kim, I think one of the things that's most relevant about that, and I agree with what Kirby's saying and what you said before, is really sort of an issue of what does it take to make transformative change in this country in a real way? I am someone who thinks that it really takes action and activity by those who are exploited, those who are oppressed. And it may seem obvious to many people, but I think it's an important reality. Geographically, when we look at who many of the people are who are locked up, they're also coming from the places that are the most exploited and are the most oppressed. And it seems ultimately that there's an important connection there between, you know, the communities that people are coming from on the outside and those who are politicized on the inside, and what that can mean beyond mass incarceration for building movements.
Yeah, I think the people that are coming from these communities, they've already seen, they're at the margins of the margins a lot of times when they go in. They're going in, a lot of times, these people are going in, like we talk about George Jackson and we talk about these people who are incarcerated, a lot of times for false charges or crimes of survival. You have so many people who, you know, were just trying to survive and got arrested. And so we have to think about how once they're inside, that's politicizing them. Like Kirby said, that's politicizing them even more and making them more radical and eating and sleeping and breathing liberation. So when they come out, they're still, because they've seen they've seen the belly of the system when they're inside. They've seen how horrible it is. So when they come out, they're these key organizers and leaders in the struggle because they've been at the bottom and the bottom of the bottom and the margins of the margins. And so they're ready and out in these streets and organizing. I think that they're going to be the ones who lead us in, you know, continue to organize for our liberation.
I'm going to steal that phrase from you, the margin of the margins. I like that.
Stop stealing. Stop. See?
I mean, you know, I don't believe in all this intellectual property, capitalism, you know, all of that. I'll give you a good saying, you give me a good saying. It's going to be, it takes a village, and we're all going to have great sayings.
It's a collective effort. It's a collective effort.
You know, Kirby, on a related issue, you know, you were recently involved in a successful effort to get a street renamed after Kai Gurley, who was a victim of the murder of NYPD. And what I wanted to ask you about that is, you know, what is the importance of things like this that can shape the environment around us, you know, to reflect the injustices that have been inflicted upon communities?
Poor and working class people who are in cages, we have a real duty to make sure that our struggles are constantly being uplifted at all times. Our family members never forget. Our community members never forget. Every time the system hands us an injustice, right? With the case of Kai Gurley, it's interesting because a grand jury actually found Peter Liang, the officer who killed Kai, guilty, right? Which was huge. People were like, whoa, this never happens. But the former DA, Ken Thompson, and Judge Chun actually reversed that decision. We had attorneys who were practicing law of 20, 30 years who said they never witnessed anything like that. And Peter Liang went home and did community service for 5 years. And Kai lay dead for 5 years. We continued organizing with the family campaign because they never forgot Kai. When we went out and petitioned in the community, everybody remembered that case. It was like, of course, yeah, whatever you need, remember that. We're Kai, you know. And to get a street named in the same neighborhood where he was killed by the police, where they erased him, right? And they wanted him to stay buried, to uplift that legacy that people care and people remember, that we remember that capitalism doesn't get to erase you, right? As a Black person within this community, as a brown person, as a poor person, they don't get to kill you and get away with it and have this immortal, you know, uplift his name and like the legacy of people's struggle, the family struggle, is the least that this system could have done for the family after the slap in the face that they did 6 years ago. And we have families like that fighting today, families who've been fighting for 15 years, 20 years. Nicholas Haywood Sr. passed away fighting for his son. Different politicians would go to his house and go on his house. That's where Ronald Williams is from. right? And sit down in Nicholas's house and tell him that they're going to fight for him and take pictures just to close the case for him to go into depression and die. This is like the legacy that they uplift, the disrespect, the racism, the games that they play, the chucking and jiving that they do to get clout off of our trauma and off of our lives. And so it's critical to keep the names relevant because we know the media won't, right? If we aren't the ones in the streets, if we aren't the ones working with the families, if we aren't the ones doing political education, we'll fade away.
You know, I'm going to ask you both this final question here. I'll start with you, Kirby. You know, people who've been watching this show for the last hour and are thinking, this all sounds so terrible. What do I do? What's your message to them, Kirby?
Get out on the street. Reach out to me. Reach out to Kim. Sign on to the work that Prakash is doing. This man right now is literally fighting for his life. Is at the grips of hell. He needs our support. Reach out to organizations like the Answer Coalition, like the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Write letters to our comrades on the inside. We have folks who have been incarcerated for 39 years, like Mumia, right? Jaleel Montekin was just released only because of people's struggle. This is some of the most long-term work you can do. Literally any tactic of resistance, whether it be your art, whether it be breakthrough, right? Which is its own strategy. Whether it be an action, whether it be letter writing or a virtual event is all necessary to bring awareness to this, right? It's our duty to do it on the outside because they literally don't have those tools to do it on the inside. Whatever you can bring to the table, all of it's needed.
Mm-hmm. Kim, your thoughts?
Exactly. I agree with everything Kirby said and more. If you want to be an outside liaison and help organize on the outside with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, you can easily reach out to me or, you know, reach out to Jailhouse Lawyers Speak via any of their social media. And also from August 21st to September 9th, you know, the fellas, they're calling for a week long of action. We're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of Attica. And so go to the organize action, go to those prisons and show them what's up and show them that we're going to continue to speak out for our brothers and sisters and children incarcerated by any means necessary, no matter what.
Right on. I was not even aware that that anniversary was coming up. 50 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Powerful.
That's what they want us to do. Trust. That's right.
That's for sure. Well, we won't let them. Certainly not here on Breakthrough News, and certainly not with fantastic friends of the show like Kim and Kirby, who are working so hard on all these issues. Really appreciate you both from South Carolina to Brooklyn joining us here on FreedomSide.
What up?
Thank you, guys. That really brings us to the close here of our show on the Freedom Side this Thursday, 8 p.m. Of course, we'll be back with you again next Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. One thing that I would ask you to do before you leave, and of course on Instagram, you can go to Justice for Ronald Williams and the Free Prakash Alliance if you want to get involved with the cases of those that you heard here just a little bit about. The Texas Jail Project, those are the individuals we spoke to right at the beginning about the situation in Texas jails. So those are some just direct actions that you can take. Support the Texas Jails Project, support the campaign to free Ronald Williams and to free Prakash, both of which you can get on Instagram. After you do all that, if you can, if possible, please go to patreon.com/breakthrough news. That's where you can become a patron and support us financially. Everything we do here is brought to you by you, I should say. We are brought to you by you. Listen, Juan, listen. I'm getting it together, okay? I'm trying to pay your salary right now. Come on, don't clown me. In all seriousness, this is how we make things happen. This is how they treat me here in the booth. But nevertheless, patreon.com/breakthrough news, patreon.com/breakthrough news. Become a patron at any level. We really appreciate it. Just dropped some new patrons only content this week. Our podcast, which I'm also the host of, The Punch Out, every day, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're now doing a weekly patrons only version, The Big Listen from The Punch Out. You can only get that if you become a patron at any level. So patreon.com/breakthrough news. That's going to do it for us here tonight from the Freedom Side on Breakthrough News.